Hey there, Nick Genetakis here. In this video, I'd like to take a moment and talk a little bit about a brand new podcast / interview site that I just launched called Running in Production. And this is going to be a guest-based podcast where I have a new guest on every show, and they're going to talk all about how they've built and run a specific web application in production. Everyone is pretty much welcome to become a guest, so it's not just going to be focused on a certain web framework. So if you are a Flask developer, or you like to use Ruby on Rails or Phoenix or Django or Node or Go or anything like that, then you are welcome to become a guest on the show, where we're basically going to spend about 45 minutes to an hour just doing a deep dive on tech stacks, success stories, lessons learned, and deployment tips. So, you'll get to be able to hear how other people, why they chose a specific web framework, maybe certain features of that web framework that fit well for their app, and really just get a whole bunch of different tips that you can apply to your own projects. So the reason I even started this site in the first place basically comes down to what's written here in the middle, which, I'm not going to narrate, but it basically came down to me just Googling all the time for things like, is anyone using Phoenix in production? And back in the day when I was learning Flask, it's like, who's using Flask in production? Or tips for running Flask in production. And it was very, very, very hard to find really good information about this. Once in a while you'll find a Quora answer or something like that. But it's 3 sentences about them doing that. And they don't really explain, in detail on, why they made those tech choices and if it's working out for them, problems they had, and how they overcame them. So that's all types of, questions and answers that I'd like to answer on the podcast and interviews. Also, it's a really, really, really big confidence booster for you as a developer, and not you specifically because, you're not a good developer or something like that. For sure, for me too as well. It's if I see other people using the similar or same tech stacks as me, that just raises my morale really high. It's whoa, there's all these people out there in the world who are doing something very similar to me in the sense that, we all have our different applications, but we're all using the same tech choices. We're all on the same team. And, even if someone's using a different tech choice than you, then there still is a lot of value, in my opinion, from listening to someone explain their story of how they've built and deployed something, because maybe you can just take a nugget or two and just apply that back to your app in some way. Because, it's not only going to be focused on specific code things. So that's basically why I started this site. And it's been running for a couple of weeks now, but I have not announced it publicly yet, really. I made 1 or 2 tweets about it, but didn't really, send it up on YouTube or to anyone on my email list. So there's not a ton of content up here yet, but I hope that changes. So, for example, last week, I just did a podcast. Well, this is really the first episode with this guy called Gabriel Robinson. And he's running this medical web app at a university. And this one is a Phoenix application. I'm not going to go into the details about the podcast because if you want to listen to it, it's all right here. But as you can see, we had some pretty interesting questions and answers during that podcast. It was very natural, unscripted. I have a couple of preparation questions that I'll send you beforehand just so you're not left in the dark. And speaking of that, if you do want to become a guest on the podcast, then if you go to the podcast section, you can click become a guest here. And there's always going to be that become a guest button up here as well. And that just loads up a very short Google form. Well, it's not very short, but it's pretty short, 5 minutes, maybe you'll fill this out. And this is basically just to help me know a little bit about the app that you have so I can prepare some really good questions specific to you. And, if you're not comfortable doing an audio-only podcast, because this is not going to be video, so if you don't have a webcam, don't worry about it, then I do have an interview section of the site as well. So this interview, I actually interviewed myself, but that was mainly for 2 reasons. So reason number 1 was, these emails, by the way, are going to be, or these interviews, by the way, are going to be email-based. So I would just send you a ton of questions up front. Well, not a ton, but a healthy amount of questions up front, and then you can answer them on whatever schedule works best for you. So, if you want to crank it out in one day or you want to spend a month answering them, that's totally cool. But, I interviewed myself about my own public website that I've been running for years here, which is my blog. I just wanted to make sure that the questions I asked were okay. So I kind of just used this to basically test the questions. And then also, I know what it's like to get writer's block and stuff like that. So I wanted to provide some type of example interview that other folks might be able to use as a guide for when they start answering their questions, just to get an idea of how you could potentially answer some of these. So, if you want to do that instead of doing a podcast episode, then if you go to the interview section of the site, you can either click get interviewed here, or there's a button up here as well. And it's a very similar Google form where it's like collecting the bare minimum, just so I understand what type of app you have, so I can ask really good questions for you specifically. And things like this, yes, I will need your email address, but that's only going to be used to reply to you, so I can actually send you the follow-up information. This is never going to be shared or marketed to or listed anywhere, never. So, I do sell courses right on my site, nickgenetakis.com, but, signing up here is definitely not going to put you on my email list to get, information about my courses. This will only be for replying to this. So that's basically what's going on with this podcast/interview site. And I would really love to have you on, if you want to share your story. And that's pretty much it. I know you're probably watching this on YouTube, but, that doesn't mean that, I'm going to be replacing what I put on YouTube with this site. So I will still continue uploading random, developer videos on YouTube, but I will also mirror these podcast episodes back to YouTube as well. Although it may be a little bit more friendly to watch them here. So right now I have a very generic default audio player, but I am working on a custom audio player. But if you're using one of these podcast platforms instead, you can just watch it there. But if you go to on this site instead of YouTube, you'll be able to take advantage of clickable show notes and links and all sorts of stuff like that. Maybe I'll put these on YouTube as well, but that's a decision I can make later. But for now, if you want to become a part of the show, or you just want to maybe read some of this stuff, then I welcome you to come to runninginproduction.com and take a look around. And with that said, if you have any questions or recommendations for the podcast or interviews, please let me know in the comments below, and I'll do my best to reply to everyone. And on that note, please drop a like if you liked the video, and I will see you in the next video.